So here is Doreen's very nicely organized speech, and here are my notes that I've been, and for those of you in the audience who know me, you would understand both of these very clearly. I really hope that everyone's enjoying this retrospective. Those of us who have been privileged to be asked to speak, I think are having a ball, okay? This retrospective down memory lane. I'm also a person who really enjoys sort of framing things for my students in analogies. Sometimes they like it, sometimes they don't. I've taken on sort of a new framework in that I'm now talking about Jethro Leroy Gibbs of NCIS and his rules, okay? So my students are now hearing about rules. Rule number one, okay, and I will very proudly say that by the end of this rotation, the majority of them can quote these, just like Gibbs' little minions do. So I look around at what we've talked about so far, and I come up with things like everything is connected to everything else. That the themes that are running through us is all about economics and politics. I actually tell my students on the first day of my community health course, those of you who are in the room thinking you're coming to a course on community health nursing are mistaken. This is a course on economics and politics because that's what drives the healthcare system. Rule number 3 is that as things change, much remains the same. We are sometimes fighting old battles with different names over the years I've been around here. I hear Brenda talk about Florence Nightingale and think about prevention and lifestyle. Prevention and lifestyle is what has changed the life expectancy and the health level in the country. I also reacted in doing this with a number of responses. While Janet can't find her car keys and Doreen doesn't remember what she had for breakfast, my first question was, what year was I president? Was I president? But it was awesome to go back and reflect, and since we're in the digital age and everything is saved on word processing, I did my master's thesis without a computer, and it was typed about 114 times. Luckily, my presidency, I now had WordPerfect and Word programs. So I could go back and reread my editorials for the bulletin. How many of you did that? Did anybody go back and read your editorials for the bulletin?
Mine worked on computer.
So what I found in doing that was so much fun. Oliver, the first thing, and this is human nature, the first thing I noticed were those places in which I had written there, T-H-E-R-E, when I meant to write T-H-E-I-R. And I have made a resolve to myself, I'm gonna go back and find the real bulletin and see if Ernie fixed it before I went to press, or if I just have to live with it. And I found themes through my editorials for 2 years. And so I wanna talk about those within the Code of Ethics, but I also wanna talk about a couple other themes since we've gotten to do a little history. Brenda mentioned Senator Richard Miller. Oh yeah. Senator, for the students in the audience, Senator Miller at one time was drafting language that educational programs would have to increase their clinical time in the last semester to something like 28 or 36 hours a week. That was because he owned some nursing homes, extended care facilities, and it was during a shortage and he was having a really hard time staffing them. And he assumed that if he could get this legislation passed increasing the clinical hours, hospitals wouldn't have enough time for all the students, so some of them would have to go work in nursing, extended care facilities. The ISNA PAC, Political Action Committee.
He doesn't know how to spell conflict of interest.
Well, I have to tell you, I lived in Indiana and belonged to ISNA, and I went to graduate school in North Carolina for a couple years, and then I came back. And I came back into this Richard Miller environment, and as well, my life is one to do, I was lucky enough that he was from my district. okay, in Indiana. So I had a number of folks, the leadership, say to me, you know, you got politics, you got to go get a hold of this guy. And he wasn't even it wasn't even couched in like polite. He kind of went, you think a bunch of women are going to affect my getting elected? No.
Oh, yeah.
So, boy, I love a good challenge. And there's a lot of really awesome nurses in this state. And we went after this guy with no rules. And as life would hand you just really lucky kind of things, we not only found someone to challenge his time in the Senate, state Senate, we found a woman to run against him in the state Senate. And Senator Betty Lawson became the new state senator from his area in northern Indiana. I have to postscript to all of you, and please, in your faith, whatever your faith beliefs are in prayer, Betty Lawson passed away within the last 4 to 6 weeks. I just saw that over the latter part of the summer. And she was such a great friend of nursing when she was in the State House, and was so ready to take on, and she was not a nurse, but ready to take on a fight that sort of the nurses in northern Indiana were like, buddy, you don't know what hornet's nest you've opened up. Okay? That was also when I had the first buttons, and I wish I'd brought one today, that said, when my colleagues are talking about political power and that we don't value our power enough, that I dig out my buttons that say 1 in every 11 registered voters is a registered nurse. Those are statistics from about a decade or so ago, but I can't see that the voting registration pockets have changed that much, but it does make me also want to go back and see if that's still true. I have to touch on the athletic theme that is running through the basketball pieces of the court on the 4th floor of Ball Residence, and etc. And for those of you, Betty Grossman was the dean of IU School of Nursing when I was a student. My bachelor's degree is from IUPUI. And I had the distinction of trying out and playing for the IUPUI women's softball, collegiate softball team when I was an undergraduate. I was the only nursing student who'd ever played collegiate softball here. I was actually the only non-PE major on the team. Everyone else was a PE major, okay? And for those of you who have this beautiful physical education complex here, we were up on 64th and Hoover at an old kids sports camp, was the first IUPUI School of Phys Ed, and that's where we practiced and changed uniforms, etc. Well, my games were 3 o'clock in the afternoon and such stuff, and I had class at the School of Nursing building. And in order to get everything, and women's sports were not well funded at that time, etc. and so forth, and I am 103, okay? I met Bev when she was 14, okay? You were 14. I was just a child. So I'm a softball player, and I would put on my uniform before I came to class in the nursing building. And I am wearing a softball jersey. I am wearing knee pants and T-socks, okay? I am 5'3". And Dean Betty Grossman is walking down the hall one day, and she goes, first of all, I was amazed she knew my name, okay? I was like, actually, it was a little frightening that she knew my name. She goes, Ella, it's so exciting to have a nursing student who plays basketball. It's May. I'm in 3/4 length knee pants and T-socks. I'm 5'3". Anyone in the audience want to guess what I said? I said, thank you. You know? Yeah, I wanted to graduate. The code of ethics. Since I'm a public health nurse by nature, And when I took on this challenge, I tend to see everything as holistic. You know, those of you who are drawing care maps and things, I've been drawing 6 degrees of separation in community health for my entire career. The only thing wrong with that is that when your practice is really driven by holism, absolutely everything is connected to everything else. So studying like where to put the arrows, and as long as you get the list of characteristics, you can just put the arrows between all of them, and you've done it right. So I took on the code of ethics thinking, how do I figure out which behaviors are not attached, or the behaviors that were through my tenure as a president were attached to all 9 of the code of ethics and all 20-something of the subcategories. So I tried to pick out a few. And I thank you to whoever has them posted on the board, since in my notes I only have abbreviations and not the whole, Doreen has the whole code typed out in her speech. It's like, the second code is commitment to the patient, whether that's an individual, a family, an aggregate, or a community. During my tenure as president, one of the resolutions that came up was about nursing fatigue and patient safety. We should always be about patient safety. We've done that better than take care of ourselves, but we should always be about patient safety. The ISNAP workshops, the peer assistant program that came back, ISNA had a long history of doing volunteer peer assistance, and as politics would have it, when the peer assistance was formalized, rather than the powers that be give it to ISNA, they subcontracted it out to some other group who failed miserably. So then ISNA got it back and started the incredibly awesome ISNAP program. Really speaks to Code 3, particularly 3.6, that we are again about protecting the patient, and we are about dealing with those of us who struggle with some kind of impaired practice. Many of my colleagues, it's really fun being almost to the end of this. Barb's got to have the best job bringing up, or Jenny, are you going to speak and bring the end? Collective bargaining and workplace advocacy. I have always been amazed that those are said as if they are an either or. Okay? And while I realize that collective bargaining is a more formalized issue, workplace advocacy is what the whole package is about. And it's very clearly attached to Code 5, which talks about duty to ourselves, taking care of ourselves as practitioners. If we don't take care of ourselves, how do we take care of the patients? I was on a plane about 8 days ago, and I was once again reminded of 2 things. One is, at this point in our culture and technology, if you don't know that seatbelt thing, you should have to take a class before you buy a ticket. But I was also reminded that when the air mask drops down and they tell you how to use it, they always say, put your own on first before you help the person that you're responsible for. And so Code 5 clearly speaks, and so does Code 6, that we as professionals have to take care of ourselves in order to be able to take care of our patients. And if we think we cannot take care of ourselves and still take care of our patients, we are going to come up failing. One of the things that happened during my presidency is one of our resolutions discussed the inauguration of the DNP. We all know what DNP is today. It seems funny even to think that we had to define what that was, and whether or not the nurses in the state were going to vote for a resolution to support it. You know, it is so now a part of our culture a number of years later. I think that networking, just everything we've talked about this morning, really ties into Code 7 and Code 9. It is about advancing the profession. It is about having a strong association that speaks for who we are in all of our diversity. And we are diverse. We are diverse. And that is awesome. But also articulating nursing values And I think the board of directors of ISNA and ANA and the associations across the country, for those students, if you end up not in Indiana, every state has a state nurses association tied to ANA, to really look at the networking importance of being connected to one another and speaking with a really, really strong voice. I noticed a couple other themes when I read my editorials. I talked about networking in every single one. And I also talked about membership, and how many of us have talked about membership this morning. You know, we should be, every registered nurse should be a member of ISNA. My goal would be required with your license kind of thing. But, you know, that doesn't happen with anything, and that's fine. But I think to continue a message that if, in fact, we look at Code 9 about articulating nursing values and valuing who we are as a profession, that $1 a day is more than the annual membership for ISNA right now. It will cost you less than $1 a day. And while we've talked about technology and how technology has moved this group forward, might I also say that you can do automatic deduction out of your checking account by the month, and it's really pretty painless. So please, those of you who are here that are not members, those of you who are members, talk to your friends who are not members. Where's Bev? They are prospective members. Sorry, they are not non-members. They are all just prospective members. Thank you for the time and the opportunity to do this.